Online, we're having great conversations. We're gonna get started here in about another minute. For those of you that are logging in, Taylor is joining us in his car because he's that dedicated to being here with us and is having trouble with internet. So that just an explanation of the great background that we see. So Taylor, I have a 1:35. Are you ready to get started?
Sounds great.
Okay, for everybody online, I just wanted to welcome you to our very last talk on the main stage of Virtual Marine Science Day. I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Cinnamon Moffett. I'm the Research Program Manager at OSU's Hatfield Marine Science Center located in Newport, Oregon, and I am your host for today's main stage talks. As you might have found out, this is a webinar format. So a little bit different than Zoom. So you do not have control over your mics, camera, or screen share. We do ask that you put any questions you have for our speaker into the chat box. You can find that by pushing the button either at the bottom or the top of your screen that says chat. Help us out if you use that chat. Try to use it for questions for Taylor, our speaker today. That'll help us keep things organized a little bit. Wanted to also let folks know we are recording this talk and it will be posted on the Marine Science Day webpage in a few days. So give us a few minutes or a few days and we'll get that up if you need to watch this again. But why we're all here and what we've already started talking about are all the great sharks. And so Taylor is here, is going to be talking to us about the sharks off Oregon coast, but a little background on Taylor first. Taylor is an assistant professor with the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife at Oregon State University, based out of the Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon. For over 15 years, Taylor has been studying sharks and other large marine predators around the world, and he uses cutting-edge biologging tags to understand how these animals move and how their the ecological interactions of these top predators. And so with that, I'm going to say, Taylor, the floor is yours. Do you want to share your screen?
Cool, great. Thanks, Cinnamon, and hello everyone. Thanks for being here this afternoon. As Cinnamon said, I'm in my car. We're actually in the field, and the internet went down today at the cabin we're at. So here I am in the car. So sort of bear with me a bit, but I appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to turn my screen off so that I can save bandwidth because I have a lot of cool videos, hopefully, to show you all. So as Cinnamon said, I study large marine predators, and I'm gonna sort of deviate a little bit from strictly talking about Oregon sharks to talk about what we do in the Big Fish Lab that I'm head of at OSU at Hatfield, because I want to give a little background about the work that we do, as it pertains to sort of sharks in Oregon, and it'll help understand about what we know and what we're learning and what we're trying to learn about sharks. So historically, we sort of have this interaction with marine predators that we try to understand them from these brief interactions, whether we've caught an animal and brought it up onto a boat or something like this. So this is my team down in California studying white sharks. And so we would coax the shark up to the surface and take photographs and try to get samples of their tissue and things like that when they come up to the surface. And then we try to explain as much as we can about these animals. But it turns out that, this brief interaction is really such a small part of their daily or their lifespan. So you imagine that this red line here is that interaction, those few seconds, and this blue line represents a full day. So you can see that trying to explain what the shark's doing for the whole day is really hard if you're only seeing it for a few seconds. It would be similar if I was to take a photo of you this morning when you first went down to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, and I took a photo and then tried to say what you did for the rest of the day or what you do for your life. It would be really hard to extrapolate that, right? So it sort of breaks down. And so what we do in the Big Fish Lab is we use a series of different sort of technologies and electronic tags in order to understand animals when they're not around us. So we actually go on board with the animals. When we can't be there, our tags can. And so it's not only sharks that we work with. There's a lot of different large species that we work with, and sort of getting back to one of the panelists' questions, or one of the questions a little bit earlier about whale sharks and whether they're vegetarians or not. I guess I could, in that sense, call them a predator, but we don't usually think of a plankton-eating filter feeder as a predator. But these are just some of the animals that we work with. On the left, there is a manta. There's a blue marlin on the top, a reef shark on the bottom right, the whale shark in the bottom left, and then a giant bluefin tuna up in Nova Scotia. And so these are just some of the different large predators that we work with. And in all of these situations, we're putting on different types of electronic tags. And I'll talk about these tags a little bit more in a few minutes, but I just wanted to sort of give a context of the different species and really different oceans and systems that we use these tags in to understand the movements of animals. So the tricky thing about oceans is that you can't just put a GPS on an animal and let it go the same way that you would put a GPS on your tracker on your dog, or on a grizzly bear or something. That signal actually can't go through water. So we have to come up with different ways in order to understand where animals move. And so one of the types of tags we use is called an acoustic tag. And so this is a tag that sends out a signal. We attach it to the back of a shark, and it sends out a signal that travels about maybe 500 meters. And if there's a receiver within about 500 meters, it'll collect that information and send it up to a satellite and send it to us. And this is just a really quick little video of what's happening there. And so this is a shark that the tag is transmitting to the receiver. The receiver transmits that up to a satellite, and then that comes back down to us. And this is a technology that lots of folks use for not just big animals like I've been talking about, but all sorts of species like salmon and rockfish, crabs, rays. And so what we're trying to do is put in a huge array of these listening receivers. So any animal that's tagged, whether it be a white shark or a rockfish or anything, when they swim by one of these receivers, it'll take that information, transmit it to a satellite, and then it'll come down to us. It'll also come down to you. So we have these smartphone apps that can keep real-time track of what animals are swimming by. And so this is just a figure of some of the places that we'd like to put these receivers out, and some of the species that we would potentially be hearing because they've been tagged, or in the case of you'll see these soniferous whales on the bottom. We also have this capacity to listen for song. So animals that swim by and have a specific song, that information transmits up to a satellite as well and tells it that there's a humpback whale around. So those are really cool when you have, or really useful when you have a receiver in the water. But the problem is they're not super useful if you don't. So if you have a shark that's swimming in the middle of the ocean, it doesn't tell you much. So we have a different type of tag called a satellite tag. And this is basically an onboard computer. And you see it sort of hanging off the back of this animated shark. And this one archives the information. So it saves all the information about where the animal goes. And then after about a year, it'll pop off and then transmit that information to us. So again, here's another video of that. So the tag pops off, and it transmits that information up to a satellite. And again, that comes down to us. So this tag said this shark was off of Hawaii, and it'll tell us where it's been this whole time. So it gives us information and a really a good look into where the animals have been and where they, but not where they are at that exact moment. The acoustic tags give us the real-time information. And then the last tag that I'll talk about, and this is a really important one for our lab, is called a biologging tag, or in this version that I show in this figure is a camera tag as well. So it has a camera as well as a bunch of sensors. And so this is basically like a Fitbit for animals. And so what we do is we attach this to a shark or a tuna or even marine mammals, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it records what the animal sees, but it also records how the animal moves, the same way that your Fitbit or your smartphone will record the steps that you take in a day. And then we can just discover a lot about the behavior and the energetics and how much energy an animal spends in a day, the same way that you can tell how much activity you've had by the number of steps that you've taken from your Fitbit. So this is just a little video of how we attach those. So the camera attaches onto the dorsal fin. It's sort of like a clothespin, clamps onto the fin. And then as the shark's swimming, it's recording all of this extra information about what it's doing. So tail beat frequency and the angle that it's pursuing prey at the surface and how often that happens. And so these tags are really important because they start to tell us how the animals are behaving So now we have this capacity through the satellite tags and acoustic tags to say where the animals are and where they're going, and also how and why they're going there. So how are they behaving? Why might they be going there? So these are the tools that we use in the lab to understand large marine animal movements. And after I should say after those biologging tags come off, instead of sending information to a satellite, we actually have to retrieve them. And so that works okay when you're somewhere like this. This is up in Alaska. This was on a salmon shark, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And it's beautiful and easy to get to, but it's a little bit different than our coastline here. So this is us looking for one of those small tags about the size of a water bottle in about 25-foot surf off of Northern California. So you have to get it back to get the data. That's one of the big tough problems. So if you ever do see an orange thing floating on the beach, check it out. And if it happens to be a tag, send it back to me and I'll send you a reward for that. So these tags altogether have been really valuable, and they provide so much information about where animals go and what they do. And this is a short video of the whale shark that I just wanted to show because it gives an idea of the different techniques that we use in order to actually tag these animals. So this whale shark, as you can imagine, whale sharks are a bit bigger, or a bit too big to put on our boat. So we actually have to get in the water and swim after them. And so this one, we'll be putting a satellite tag in. So that's me dropping down, and you can tell the shark barely even, it doesn't really even notice at all that it's been tagged. It sort of continues its daily behaviors. And this is an elephant seal that we put the similar type of biologging tag on. And you'll see this is actually on the back of the animal. And this shows some of the value of these tags because it gives us information not only about what the animal's doing, but what it's seeing. So, you know, and when we can go in the water with the animal, we see how it's using its environment. We also see who they come in contact with. So this is an elephant seal with a camera on it coming up to a harbor seal. And this is one of my favorite videos because the harbor seal sort of gets down in this, like, if you ever had a puppy or seen puppy play pose, it sort of gets down in that puppy play pose and they're checking each other out. And then all of a sudden they just get a little bit too close and they both take off. And so you know, this is something that we would never experience or never see without these types of technologies. So it's really unique to be able to go underwater with animals. And it also tells us about unique behaviors. So this is a white shark swimming in South Africa. And for those of you that live around the coast or spend time in the coastal waters, you'll recognize kelp forest. And we found out from this video that sharks actually swim in the kelp forests. They hunt seals in the kelp forest in a very different way than that we had ever expected them to do. So another really cool behavior that we saw through these tags. We can also use them to survey the structure of ecosystems. So this is a shark that's swimming around in a coral reef in the Indian Ocean. And this is well below where divers usually go. This is about 80 meters down, very clear water, so there's still some light. But what we see is that the shark is doing a survey of the reef for us. So we can look at the species of corals, we can look at the species of fish, and we can actually use that information in order to assess the health of these underwater ecosystems. So the shark's doing all the work for us. We don't even have to get wet. So after a number of years of using these types of tags, we've started to learn a lot about how animals move and where they go and why they go. And this is just a small excerpt of the tags that were put on during this huge initiative called the Tagging of Pacific Pelagics. And this was a 10-year huge collaboration with thousands of tags distributed. And this is a really quick video. And each of these different colors is a different species. And I think it just gives a really good sense. Right in the middle there is the Central California West Coast. And each of these colors is a different species. And each line is basically a different animal. And so it really shows us how valuable these tools are in order to understand where animals were moving. So if we are going out and just catching animals or coaxing them to the surface to study them, you know, that would be a pinpoint in this whole globe. And we wouldn't have known about any of these huge migrations that so many of these animals are making. And these are whales and seals and sea lions and sharks and tunas, albatross and other birds. And so this is a huge amount of animals that are going really far places that we wouldn't know unless we had these tags. So that's sort of the background about the techniques that we use and some of the tools that we use in the lab. And now I want to get into a little bit more about what the original title was, which is Sharks Off of Oregon. And to do that, I first present sort of the idea of a food web. And so all of us are familiar with salmon. We've had some interaction, whether it was eating or fishing for or hearing or learning about salmon. And so salmon are a really critical part of our ecosystem here off the Oregon coast. And if we were thinking about sort of what the food web would be, who eats the salmon and what are salmon important for, one of the first ones that come up would be orcas. So the resident killer whales that are eating salmon. And so if we were to say, what's a salmon predator? Orca would be one of the first ones we'd come up with. Next, we might think of other marine mammals. So these are harbor seals, again, eating salmon. A third one is birds. And so birds are a really big predator of salmon, especially salmon smolts coming down rivers out into the oceans. And probably the biggest predator of all is us. And so that's a picture of my wife and I last year doing some salmon fishing. And so humans also take huge numbers of salmon out of the oceans. And so historically, this is how we've thought about the ecosystems and how we manage our coastal ecosystems. This is very simplified, I should say, but this is sort of the way that we've if you looked in a textbook, it's sort of a simplified version of how it's thought about. And so I'd sort of bring that down to simplify it a little bit. So these animals, the orcas, the humans, the seabirds, the pinnipeds are eating salmon, and that's how we've thought about it for a long time. But it turns out that there's also a big there's a group of really large coastal sharks that, in my mind, should be part of this story as well, but we haven't really thought about them. Just to put it in perspective, there have been no studies in Oregon on any of these coastal species of sharks. So broadnose sevengills, white sharks, and salmon sharks. And I'm going to talk about each of those a little bit in a second. But just to put it in context, we've thought a lot about orcas and seabirds and pinnipeds, but we never really have thought about what role that these sharks play in. And so there isn't a ton that we know about them in our region specifically. But I'll talk about what we do know and then how we're trying to look at them. So the first I'll talk about is the broadnose Sevengill shark. And it is an ectothermic predator. So it is basically the same temperature as the water around it. And that becomes important in a few minutes when I talk about salmon sharks and white sharks, which have a very different technique, physiology. They get to about 3 meters maximum length, and they can hunt individually, but also really cool, they can hunt cooperatively to take down larger marine mammal prey. And we know that they are seasonally reside into the bays along the Oregon coast. And then they probably go more coastally up and down north and south during the other times of years. And they have this change where smaller animals eat more fish and other sharks. And then the larger animals, the adults tend to eat lots of marine mammals. But again, we haven't really focused studies on those animals here. And so our lab is looking at the feeding ecology, which is basically how much do they eat, what do they eat, where do they eat, so that we can start to understand the effect that they have on the different populations of fish and our coastal ecosystems. Another species that we have here, which Cinnamon had spoken about right before we started, was the salmon shark. And salmon shark are awesome. They are a relative of the white shark. They're in the same family. They're called lamnids. And one of the coolest things about them is they are warm-bodied. So they elevate the temperature of their eyes, of their brain, and basically of their stomach. And what's really fascinating about that is that allows them to be super dynamic in super cold water. So these animals can be 20 degrees above the water around them. The water can be 3 degrees Celsius, and they're up in 24, 25 degrees, which is really incredible. It allows them to be fast and agile to catch their fast, agile salmon prey. They reach about 250 centimeters, and they're in Alaska. They're a significant consumer, about 25%, 12 to 25% of salmon runs. But again, we haven't really studied them here, but we do know from some of those satellite tag data that we've collected from studying them in Alaska that they come down our coast. So each of these blue dots is a location from a salmon, shark. Blue ones represent when they're transiting, and the green represent when they're foraging. And so we can see that the foraging happens right along the coast, so right in our coastal marine ecosystems. And then this other figure is similar, but it's basically it's a heat plot. So the places where you see the warmer temperatures, again, this is the west coast of North America, where you see the warmer color. So the yellows is where more sharks spend more time. So you'll see this little star there is Newport, right where I am, and that is, you know, one of these hot spots for salmon sharks. So they're an important part of our coastal marine ecosystem. And then probably the most commonly known shark that we have off our coast here is the white shark. And these are, again, they're warm-bodied like the salmon shark. They have these large-scale migrations. So basically they're coastal for part of the year, and then they head offshore for the other part. And if you look at the figure on the bottom, which just has date on the bottom, this is basically the probability of it being in one location versus the other. So the blue is the probability of it being on the coast. The blue is probability of being offshore, and green is on the coast. So you can see that they have a seasonal cycle where sharks are along the coast in September, October, November, and then offshore during our real summer months. As I said, they're endotherms. They have a shift where when they're young, they're eating fish and living down in warm waters in Southern California. And as they get bigger, about 9 feet, they switch to eating marine mammals and move up towards us. And they get to about 7 years of age. But again, there haven't been any studies of the sharks up here, but tagging studies, and these are different lines, are different tracks of sharks that I've tagged down in California. You can see that these sharks go offshore, and then they come back and they move up and down the coast up to Oregon, and sometimes as far as Alaska. And this shouldn't be a surprise because all of us have probably heard about them along our coasts. And in fact, I went down to the beach with my two intrepid explorers here, and we found a sperm whale that had washed up on the beach last year in near Beverly Beach, just north of Newport. And I'll warn you, this next video is a little bit, well, it might seem a little bit gruesome, but you'll notice that this is the animal, and there were about 40, 45 or 50 different bite marks on the animal, and some of these as large as 24 inches across. So this was a really important sign for us that the white sharks are there, and they're in good numbers. And so that many bites is probably a good handful of animals around. So we know that sharks are here. We just haven't had the opportunity in the means to study them, but that's what our lab is doing. So I guess to sum that up is that our food web here is really dependent on a lot of different big predators. In what my lab and what we're trying to do at Hatfield is to understand how these other predators that haven't really been taken into account play into the role or into the food web and the health and maintenance of our coastal marine ecosystems here. So if folks want to find any other additional information, there are a few films that we've done with these projects with Discovery Channel and National Geographic. I would stress that there's actually science in these shows. These are not sensational. They're really about the science that we do, and so very different than some of the content that you've probably seen before. There's also a number of websites. So my website, which is the marine research at marineresearch.oregonstate.edu, and look up the Big Fish Lab. There you can also see Sea Grant has this beautiful shark identification guide. They've allowed me to use that on my website. So if you want to look more about what species are here and what they look like, that's a great place, as well as some other websites that are hosted by collaborators that can point out some of these data that I've and highlight some of the data that I've shown. There's also this smartphone app called SharkNet, which shows where white sharks are in California, and we're hoping to update that with an array along our coast that shows sharks and all the other species that appear. And lastly, if there's anyone that's an educator or wants to get more experience with the data that we use, Ocean Tracks is a website that houses a bunch of data from 4 different species that we work with. It's the real data, and you can peruse those and actually analyze data, the real data in relation to oceanographic temperatures, different characteristics in different species. And there's also curriculum built into that if you are an educator that would like to use that for your advanced middle school or high school and college classes. So with that, that's what I have. Here's my information. I will leave that up for a few seconds, and then I am happy to take any questions that y'all have about sharks, about what we do, and happy to talk about that. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. We have lots of questions in the chat. I'll try to work through a couple of these. We are almost out of time, everybody. So we'll do just a couple, but if we don't get to them, remember you're welcome to reach out to Taylor directly, and he gave that information. Taylor, was the app that you used to make some of your animations a public app?
So which animations?
The tags that were being released?
So no, those were all parts of films that either National Geographic or Discovery or the Monterey Bay Aquarium had put together.
Great, thanks for answering that. The other question that came in early was about the tag on the sea lion, or the elephant seal, I think.
Elephant seal.
Yeah, in the interaction with the seal, do you think that had to do with the look of the tag on the elephant seal, or was that do you have a feeling about how animals change their behavior with those types of tags on them, and how they interact with other animals because of those tags?
Right. So I think that normally what we see with the animals is that there isn't a substantial change in behavior, and actually there's a really thorough. I guess the expectation is that you put these tags on it, and the reason you put them on is because you want to know how the animals are behaving. If your tag changes the behavior of the animal, then the whole concept is fundamentally flawed. And so we go through a really rigorous process that actually the whole community, that whether it's birds or sharks or anything, that put tags on animals to make sure that they don't affect their behavior. And so that interaction, I think, was more of just two sort of curious animals just checking each other out, because there wasn't they were sort of in the same place, and I don't think that the harbor seal necessarily saw anything weird about the elephant seal. I think they were both just like, hey, we're in the same place. What are you doing?
Great, thank you. And then this might be a great question to end on. Can you just tell us what the average Oregonian can do to help sharks?
Absolutely. So that is a wonderful question. So as I sort of mentioned, that we're working for the first time to focus on sharks here. We've looked at sharks in other regions, but no one has ever really focused sharks. This basically from Northern California up into British Columbia. And so we're at the foundational stages. So on my website, there is a shark identification page and a shark reporting page. So the best way for us to start to understand where sharks are occurring and when they're occurring and who's seeing them is to report that. So if you're ever at the coast and you see a shark or you hear about a shark, jump onto the webpage, and all you have to do is say, this is where I saw it, and then this is what I saw, or add whatever details you want, or add a picture if you want. But that gives us the foundational information about how to find these sharks. So that would be a huge first step. And if there's more questions and folks want to get more involved, I'd be happy to speak with you. My email address is on there. I also have, the Big Fish Lab has virtual exhibits. And if you haven't been there yet, please go there and you can see some of the manta tagging and some of the white shark tagging that goes on there, but also my information. And feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk more about sharks. This is what I do for a living and I love it. So I'm happy to geek out about it with you anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. I was going to plug your virtual exhibit as well. So anybody who hasn't had a chance, if you go to the exhibit hall on the Marine Science Day page, and you'll be able to find the Big Fish Lab there and get some really great information. It's very well done. And we'll also link you to Taylor's main webpage. So if you want to find that information, that's another way to find it. Just want to thank everybody that joined us today at these talks. I really appreciate it. If we weren't able to answer your question, again, reach out to Taylor or myself and we'll make sure you get those answered. And Taylor, you're just getting a whole bunch of thank yous, virtual applause are all happening in the chat. So everybody, thank you so much. Again, go join and take a look at the rest of Marine Science Day. And these recordings will be available in a couple of days. And Taylor, good luck with your field work. Stay dry up
Thank
there,
you.
and we'll see you when you're back.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, bye now. Bye, everybody.
Numbers are slowly dropping.
All right, I'm just going to end the presentation, Shannon. And for everybody that's hanging out, thank you so much. Go enjoy in Marine Science Day or get outside. It's now raining here again in Newport, but hopefully you're someplace warm and sunny. Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome. Have a good day.